أعوذ بالله العلي العظيم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. Let's let people in. Middle. Oh, shit. Jeff is coming. There's Jeff. Join. Okay, good crew of people today. Welcome everybody to this our session 6 of Suhrawardi. What I decided to do is I split up this particular recital, Visionary Treatise, into two because it is extremely packed. And then I went and retrieved my copy of Corbin's L'Archange and Poupée and read through this section. This is quite an investment. If you read French, I would very much recommend you get a copy of this. It's a little bit on the pricey side now from what I've seen advertised on Amazon, but it is a worthwhile investment because it not only has all of these recitals, it has a few more items than what we get in here. But the commentary that Corban offers for each of these recitals, the way he unpacks these, a lot of them, is outstanding. I mean, this is something that Thaxton should have himself done, that he doesn't do in either of these two editions of his translation. But on this particular treatise, the Haqiqat al-Ishq, on the reality of love, or the Munes al-Ushaq, the solace of the lovers, the commentary by Corban is dense. I only had translated the intro and then the subsequent commentary by Corban and then his notes. That it didn't cover the actual French translation of the treatise itself. One thing he does do, though, is that Corban seems to think that the second half of the treatise is actually the main part, that everything that we get in at the beginning of the treatise is basically leading towards the latter half, where it culminates with the figures of Zuleika and Joseph or Jacob. So, and his observations, I think, are justifiable, because if this is a treatise about the Haqiqatul Ishq, the reality of love, then what Corban understands by image and exemplar around this concept of ishq or love is extremely important, because in the first chapter, it is quite, it's, even though Suhrawardi phrases things in a very allegorical way, there is a bit of a ambiguity in what he's saying as well. It's only towards the end, in the second half, that we get to really look at what this exemplar of the image. So the first half is the image, then the second half of the treatise, kind of ruptures into what the exemplar of the image actually is. And Corban really discusses this and fleshes this whole idea out extremely well in those passages that I had translated. So I think it might be worth your while to look at those, and this way we can kind of extend this particular treatise, because it's such a central element to Suhrawardi. This treatise usually gets glossed over by a lot of people when they're talking about Suhrawardi's perspective. But as Mohsen Kadivar put it in one of the videos that he did in Persian, if we were to ever teach a course on the concept of love in Persian mystical literature, this particular treatise would occupy one of the prides of place. The other ones being Ahmad Ghazali's Sab'ane al-Ushaq, that's a very important one in itself. Then Araqi's Lama'at, his irradiations, and in the commentary by Abdurrahman Jami, Asha'at and Lama'at, the rays of the Book of the Irradiations. These are all key elements of Persian mystical literature on what the Persian esoteric and mystical mind understand by what this concept of ishq even is. Some of this has been translated. We have a good, decent translation of the Lama'at of Araqi that was done by William Chittick and Peter Lamborn Wilson back during the 80s. That's available. I think there may be a PDF of it. The publisher was Paulus Press. I have a hard copy of it here. If not, maybe if I can find a more swifter scanner than the one I have right now, I can maybe at the end of this course, I can scan it for you, but it might not be worth, I mean, it might be worth your while to even read through some of these and compare it with what we have here with Suhrawardi. So anyway, without further ado, let's look at our treatise 6 in its first 6 chapters on the reality of love, fi haqiqatul ishq, or the solace of the lovers, Munis al-Ushaq. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We relate unto thee a most excellent story, Ahsan al-Qisas, by revealing unto thee this Quran, whereas thou wast before one of the negligent. And the poem. Another person coming. Were it not for you, we would not have known desire. Were it not for desire, we would not have known you. If there were no love and no grief from love, who would have heard the many beautiful words spoken by you? If there were no breeze to snatch away the tresses, who would have shown the lover the beloved's cheeks? Chapter 1. Know that the first thing God created was a glowing pearl. Here's the pearl again. He named intellect. The first thing God created was the intellect. خلق الله تعالى أول ما خلق الله تعالى العقل. This pearl he endowed with 3 qualities: the ability to know God, the ability to know itself, and the ability to know that which had not existed and didn't exist. This could, although he glosses exactly what he means by this in this particular treatise, this is also another way of talking about the first intellect. From the ability to know God, there appeared husn, or who is called beauty, and from the ability to know itself, there appeared ishq, who is called love. From the ability to know that which did not exist and did exist, there appeared huzn, who is called sorrow. Of these 3 who sprang from the source and are brothers one to the other, beauty, the eldest, gazed upon himself and saw that he was extremely good. A luminosity appeared in him and he smiled. From that smile, thousands of cherubim appeared. Love, the middle brother, was so intimate with beauty that he could not take his eyes from him and was constantly at his side. When beauty smiled, appeared a consternation befell love, who was so agitated that he wanted to move. Sorrow, the youngest, clung to him, and from his clinging the heaven and earth appeared. Chapter 2. When Adam was created from clay, a cry rang out through the celestial hosts that a vicegerent had been assembled from 4 things. Suddenly, the designer of destiny placed the compass of arrangement on the tablet of the earth. A beautiful form appeared. The 4 natures, which are inimical to each other, were arrested by the 7 wanderers, who are captains of the elite and confined in the prison of the 6 directions. Obviously, he's talking about the 7 planets. When the Jamshid of the sun had revolved about the center 40 times, when 40 morns had been completed, the garb of humanity was thrown over the shoulders and the fourfold became one. So this gives us the kind of the allegorical process of creation, of material creation here. The news of Adam was broadcast in the celestial kingdom, and the population told the king Beauty that they desired to see him. Beauty said, I shall go first unattended. If it pleases me, I shall dwell there several days. You may follow me there. King Beauty mounted the seat of might and set out for the realm of Adamic existence. He found it to be a pleasant, delightful place. He dismounted. He embraced Adam so that he completely encompassed him. When Love learned that Beauty had gone, he put his arm around Sorrow's shoulder and set out to find Beauty. The people of the celestial kingdom learned of this and all ran off at once after it. Love reached Adam's realm and saw Beauty crowned with a diadem of absolute majesty and seated on the throne of Adamic existence. He wanted to make room for himself, but he struck his forehead against the wall of amazement and lost his footing. Sorrow grabbed him by the arm. When Love opened his eyes and saw the people of the celestial kingdom crowding in, he turned to them. They bowed and acknowledged his sovereignty over them. They all then set out for Beauty's court. As they approached, Love, the commander-in-chief, handed over the deputyship to Sorrow and commanded everyone to kiss the ground from afar because they would not have been able to endure closer proximity to him. When the eyes of the people of the celestial kingdom fell upon Beauty, they all bowed down and kissed the ground. The angels fell prostrate, all of them together. We're on 1530. It had been a long time since Beauty had packed up and left the city of Adamic existence and returned to his own world. He was waiting for a sign of a place that would be worthy to establish his sovereignty. When Joseph's turn came, Beauty was informed. Immediately he set out. Love took Sorrow by the sleeve and went in pursuit of Beauty. As he approached, he saw Beauty so mingled with Joseph that there was no difference between the two. Love ordered Sorrow to pull the chain of humility. From Beauty's court, a voice cried out, "Who is it?" Love replied in the tongue of ecstasy, "Your servant returns wounded to your bosom. This helpless one left on foot but returns crawling." Beauty placed the hand of indifference against the breast of entreaty. In a sad voice, Love recited this verse, "By the fact that I have no one but you, be not cruel. I cannot endure your cruelty." When Beauty heard these words, he answered disdainfully, "O Love, my delight in you is finished. Today I do not remember you." As Love despaired, he took Sorrow by the hand and set out into the wilderness of perplexity, muttering these words to himself. "May no hand be victorious in gaining union with you. May nothing beside my soul burn in grief over you. Now that in expectation my day has come, I am gone. May no one experience such a day." Chapter 3. Now that Sorrow was separated from Beauty, he said to Love, "We were always together in Beauty's service. We have our mantles of discipleship from him, and he is our master. Now that we have been exiled, the plan is that each of us should go off in a different direction and undertake a journey in self-discipline. Let us stand steadfast against the hard knocks of fortune. Let us withdraw in submission, and let us perform prostrations on the iridescent carpet of fate and destiny. It may be that through the good offices of the 7 reclusive old men who are the tutors of the world of generation and corruption, we may return to our master's service." Then Sorrow set out for the land of Canaan, and Love took the road to Egypt. Chapter 4. Sorrow's way was not far, and he reached Canaan in one stage. He entered the city gate and sought an old man in whose company he might spend several days. He was informed of Jacob of Canaan, whose cell he entered unexpectedly. Jacob's eyes fell upon him, and he beheld a traveler whose countenance was familiar, and in whom traces of affections were apparent. "Welcome," he said. "You have brought 1,000 gladnesses. From which direction have you honored us?" Sorrow replied, "I come from Nowheresville, from the city of the Pakan, the city of the pure ones." With the hand of humility, Jacob spread the carpet of patience and sat Sorrow upon it. He himself sat next to him. After a few days had passed, Jacob became so intimate with Sorrow that he could not be without him for even an instant. To Sorrow he gave everything he had. First of all, he presented him with his eyesight, and his eyes became white with mourning. And then he named his cell the abode of sorrows and gave management of it to him. What fear have I of enemies if you are my friend or consoler in the grief of separation? Tell my enemy to eat his heart out, for as I have wished, you are in my embrace. Chapter 5. Meanwhile, distraught, Love set out for Egypt, making double time until he reached the city and entered the market covered with the dust of the road. Love appeared in the dust of the age, and murmuring of that beauty's loveliness arose. What is reason now that love has strutted in? What is patience now that the beloved has appeared? After so many years of being lost, my heart's name has arisen from the loops of that musk-scented lock of hair. A great clamor arose in the land of Egypt. The people fell into chaos. Love, like a wandering dervish, his face uncovered, passed by every prominent place and looked at every beautiful lad and sought his beloved in every corner. No one suited him. He asked directions to the captain's house and stuck his head into Zoleikha's chamber. This is Potiphar's wife, for those who don't know the Islamic equivalent. When she saw this, she arose, turned to Love and said, "May 100,000 dear souls be sacrificed for you. From where have you come? Where are you going? What are you called?" Love replied, "I am from the sacred abode, from the quarter of Ruh Abad, the land of spirits, and from the lane of Husn, or beauty. My house is next to that of sorrow. My job is to travel. I am an abstracted mendicant. Every moment I go in a different direction. Every day I am in a different place. Every night I make for myself a different lodging. When I am among the Arabs, they call me Ishq. Among the Persians, I am known as Mehr. In heaven, I am called the mover. On earth, I am known as the stabilizer. Although I am ancient of days, I am still young. Although I am bereft of possessions, I am from a noble family. My tale is long. My story is lengthy, and you are weary. We were 3 brothers, brought up in luxury and never knowing want. If I were to tell you of my province and describe the marvels that are there, you would not understand or comprehend. Nonetheless, it is a province which is the last of our provinces. Someone who knows the way can reach it in 9 stages from your realm. I should tell you of that province in such a way that you may understand. Chapter 6, Love's Tale. Know that above this 9-storied pavilion is a vault called the City of the Soul. It has ramparts of might and a moat of power. At the gate of that city is stationed a young old man whose name is Javed Kharat, meaning perennial wisdom. He continually travels about in such a way that he never moves from his place. He is a good guard. He knows how to recite from the divine book and is extremely eloquent, but is mute. He is old in years, but has never seen the passage of time. He is very, very old, but is still untouched by decrepitude. Whoever would reach that city must cut 6 ropes from 4 arches, make a harness of love, place the saddle of intuitive experience on the steed of yearning, paint his eyes with the paint of wakefulness with the brush of hunger, take the sword of knowledge in hand, and seek the way to the microcosm. Let him come from the direction of the north and seek the inhabited quarter. When he reaches the city, he will see a 3-storied pavilion. The first story is fitted with 2 chambers. In the first is a divan placed over water, and on it reclines someone whose nature is inclined to humility. He is extremely clever, but his dominant trait is forgetfulness. He can solve any problem in a flash, but he never remembers anything. Next to him in the second chamber is a divan placed over fire, on which reclines someone whose nature is inclined to dryness. He's very nimble and quick, but unclean. It takes him a long time to discover illusions, but once he understands, he never forgets. When the seeker sees him, he will begin to speak smoothly, and try to seduce him with various things. Every moment he will present himself in different guise. Let the seeker pay him no attention, but turn away and cry out to his steed to go to the second story. There too he will see two chambers. In the first is a divan of air on which someone reclined whose nature is inclined to coldness. He loves to lie, confuse, speak nonsense, waylay, and murder. He is always passing judgment on things he knows nothing about. This is all talking about the concupiscent and the irascible nature of the soul. Okay? Next to him in the second chamber is a divan of vapor on which someone reclines whose nature is inclined to heat. He has seen much of good and evil. Sometimes he appears angelic and sometimes demonic. Strange things can be found in his presence. He knows sorcery well and has learned magic. When he sees the seeker, he will start to fawn over him. He will grab the reins and try to destroy him. But let him brandish a sword before them and threaten them until they run away. When he reaches the third story, he will see a delightful chamber where there is a divan of pure earth, on which reclines someone whose nature is near equilibrium. He is absorbed in thought. The many things left to him in trust are piled around him, and he never betrays anyone's faith in him. Whatever profit is made from these things is entrusted to him so that they may be put to use again. When the seeker leaves, there he will be confronted with 5 gates. The first gate has 2 doorways, in each of which is an oblong, almond-shaped throne with 2 curtains, one black and the other white, hung before. There are many ropes fastened to the gate. On both of the thrones reclines someone who serves as a lookout. He can see many years' distance and is usually off on a journey. When he moves from his place, he can drive in one instant wherever he wants to go, no matter how great the distance. When the seeker arrives, let him command that no one should be let through the gate, and that if a chink should appear at any place, he should be informed immediately. Going to the second gate, you will find 2 doorways, beyond each of which is a corridor long and twisted and talismanically sealed. At the end of each corridor is a round throne, and over the 2 reclines someone who is a master of news and information. He has messengers who are continually on the go, seizing every sound that comes to be and delivering it to the master who comprehends it. Let the seeker order him to put back everything he hears and not to be influenced by every sound or led astray by every voice. From there, he will go to the third gate. It too has 2 doorways. From each one, he will go through a long corridor until he emerges in a chamber in which there are 2 seats on which someone sits. He has a servant called Air who goes around the world every day and brings a bit of every good and foul thing he sees. These things he takes and disperses. Let the seeker tell him not to engage in much commerce and not to associate with good-for-nothings. From there, he will come to the 4th gate. This one is wider than the other 3. Inside is a pleasant spring surrounded by a wall of pearl. In the middle of the spring is a divan that moves, and on it sits someone who is called the taster. He distinguishes between 4 things which he can divide and classify. Night and day he is occupied with this labor. Let the seeker order him to continue his labor only as is necessary. Then he will come to the 5th gate, which surrounds the city. Everything that is in the city is within the scope of this gate, around about which a carpet is spread. And on the carpet sits someone so that the carpet is filled by him. He rules over 8 different things and distinguishes among the 8. Not for one instant is he negligent in his labor. He is called the distinguisher. Let the seeker order the carpet to be rolled up and the gate shut. Having passed through the 5 gates, he will emerge in the city. Let him head for the city forest. Arriving there, he will see a fire kindled and someone sitting cooking something over the fire. One person is fanning the flames while another waits anxiously while it is being cooked. Another separates the lighter portion that boils up from that which remains at the bottom of the pot and distributes it to the inhabitants of the city. The lighter part he gives to the subtle and the heavier to the gross. Another very tall person stands by and seizes by the ears those who have finished eating and pulls them up. A lion and a boar wait in the forest. The former is occupied day and night with killing and tearing apart, while the latter is busy pilfering, eating, and drinking. Let the seeker loose a lasso from his saddle ring and cast it over the necks. Bind them tightly and throw them down on the spot. Let him entrust the reins to his steed and cry out to it, and in one leap it will scale the 9 barriers and stand before the gateway to the city of the soul. Immediately the old man will greet him, embrace him, and summon him forward. There is a spring called the water of life, and he will be commanded to bathe himself in it. Having attained immortality, he will be taught the divine book. This water of life and the spring of life is directly a trope connected to Khidr, by the way, in this very vision, not in this particular vision recite, but in the other ones. Above this city are several other cities. He will be shown the way to each of them and taught how to recognize them. If I were to tell you of those cities, you could not comprehend. In disbelief of me, you would be drowned in the sea of amazement. Let this bit suffice. For if you understand what I have already said, it is enough for you to get by safely. And that was the first 6 chapters of On the Reality of Love, Fi Haqiqat al-Ishq, or Munis al-Ushaq, the intimate of the lovers of Suhrawardi, and the floor is now open to anybody who wants to talk about any element of this. It is dense, but the threads are pretty consistent. Who wants to go first?
If no one else wants to go, I'll take a stab at it. So I'm focusing on the chapter you just read, the chapter 6. And when I was reading through it, I was trying to think of the first 5 stages are, to me, those were the elements. Those were the I guess the, what does he call them? The lords, species, lords of the species of the elements.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, there's a lot going on there that's really interesting. But what's occurring to me is that before going to the 5 senses, the journeyer is going through the elements. And I'm wondering why that is, because if we think of it in terms of like Mullah Sadra's births of the soul or the growths of the soul, you know, all of us are already kind of in a sensible birth. Like we're already beyond the purely corporeal.
This is a good point that Corban actually addresses in those sections I translated. For Suhrawardi, we are in the macrocosm. The journey is into the microcosm, right? Which should tell you what all of the symbolism is about. So the traveler, the way for the Salik is not traveling outside, there's traveling inside. So you have to break through the barriers of the elements first in the macrocosm to be able to enter that domain of the microcosm within yourself, with its cities and the 5 levels, etc. Which are actually, if you look at it, there's actually 7 levels here. He doesn't phrase it as the 6th or the 7th, but there are 7 levels in this story, in this particular chapter 6.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so going have to go through the, because I think there's another, it might be Hai Ben Yakzan is
Yeah. It
where
does
something like this also.
exactly the same thing. Yeah.
What's really interesting is that the way that they're described, and this could just be because of the orientation, that the orientation is where we're trying to ascend beyond everything, so that the description is of the elements at least is like demonic. They all are like tricksters and like
Mhm.
just trying to trap you and trick you.
Yeah.
Um,
This is sort
so
of the Platonist talking here. The Platonist and the Gnostic too. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, I would just explain it as it's because the way that we're looking at it from the point of view of where we want to get to,
Yeah.
like because otherwise, you know, I don't think he would. I don't really know, but I don't think he would want to. That would want to be his considered position is that these are like demonic. The
No,
elements
no,
are.
no. It isn't. These are um this is why I think the commentary tradition on these sorts of things are very important to read. And also why, as I'm, starting to assemble this book on Suhrawardi's Al-Waradat wa Taqdisat, the spiritual influxes and sanctifications, the first item that appears is an item called the Raqim al-Qudsi, the sacred inscription. It's a long part of the manuscript, but goes on for about 10 folios, about 20 pages nearly. And he very distinctly begins this thing by exhorting the wayfarer against any form of dualism, whether this be a dualism in terms of setting up gods before God, or whether it be various dualism implicitly between even matter and spirit. Although, in some of the prayers, once we get to the prayers to the planetary intelligences, there's one particular passage where he deprecates the universal matter, the Hayu law. But these are sort of quirks to Sohrawardi as in his very Platonic idealist mode that I think we can forgive him because from one aspect, one can say that while these various senses from the macrocosm moving into the microcosm are, yeah, they are the veils and all that kind of stuff. But from another angle, especially when you look at it then from the lens of um, even Arabi and Mullah Sadra and those guys, these senses themselves, the veils are ideational in themselves. These things are as they are. They are also perceiving and occurring within being itself. Now, where this gets very interesting in this particular visionary narrative is that when we go back to the beginning of it, right? What does Suhrawardi say here? He says when he's talking about the pearl, right? That now you can take the pearl in many different senses. In this, you can take it as the soul. You can take it as the first intellect. You can, basically look at it. But the pearl is endowed with three qualities: the ability to know God, the ability to know itself, and the ability to know that which had not existed and didn't exist. Right. So um, once then we philosophically break this down, this positions the perceiver, quad the pearl, as occurring within that very terrain that the wujudis call wujud. So there isn't really no dualism in that sense, right? So how to take this chapter 6 of the Munasal Oshaq is basically in the conventional sense that the senses on one level, when one is only occurring in the macro, when one is only perceiving the macrocosmic world at the beginning of the path, that in itself, as the macrocosm, is a veil to the microcosm. And so you have to travel backward, both interiorly, which is then the vertical, the interior journey itself becomes then the vertical journey to the spirit. And then once you make it to the other side, then when you look back, then there is no dualism because all of these faculties were already there to begin with. All that has happened on the part of the wayfarer is that they've understood what these faculties were doing before they received the proverbial ishraq.
mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And even, I mean, in some of these recitals, like the recital of the birds, like it's even suggested that the angelic realms are evil in the sense that they're potential obstacles, right? Like, so that makes it clear that it really is relative to one's own position or progress on the journey.
100%. And we'll see this in his prayers to the planets, where for each of the planets he prays to, he then tells them, ask your father and your principal, and let him ask his father and his principal, and all the way to the first intellect, and then plead with him to plead with his cause, the light of lights on my behalf. So this is the thing that Suhrawardi knows not to stop. And this is one of the caveats, is that not to stop, that you keep going. You acknowledge these various ranks and the intellect, soul, and its heaven each have their place, but they're always, you have to go also plead with them to go beyond themselves to their own principle. So this is what he is, in a sort of a roundabout way, trying to indicate here by distinguishing beauty, love, and sorrow, right? Especially with love, who is seeking its principle, beauty, who basically rejects it. And then that establishes the interesting dialectic between love, sorrow, and their quest to unite with beauty again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a couple of other observations about the elements. One is that there's consciousness that's attributed to them, right? Like water is forgetful, and one of these is they're clever, and one is demonic or angelic, and the last one is absorbed in thought. That was also something that kind of stuck out to me, that it's not just the senses that have consciousness, but there's the elements themselves are endowed with light.
Yeah.
And then this interpretation might not work.
Remember,
Given what we just
we're
said.
not inside a Newtonian universe here with Suhrawardi. This universe is very much non-Newtonian. Everything is sentient. There is no insentient whatsoever. Everything lives. Everything is imbued with some form of consciousness.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
But the last thing I wanted to say was, and this might not work given everything we're saying, but I kind of got the impression that it kind of sounded like Dante's Inferno, just the part of the elements.
Yeah.
Because the instructions that are given to the person what to do, well, by the time we get to the senses, it's just about closing them up, right? Because otherwise sorrow is going to come and destroy everything. So it's like we have to get ready for that. But here it was like, just don't pay any attention, turn away, and then finally brandish a sword and threaten them until they run away. And it sounds a lot like what Virgil says to Dante in the Inferno.
Yeah.
It's like he has to go through it. And I guess this is another question. It's like what is because the purgatory is where he burns everything off.
Yes.
But before that, it's like he has to just witness things, and his only task is to just keep going and not stop anywhere. So this sounded a little bit like that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, this is, Miguel Acid Palacios, who wrote those studies on Ibn Arabi and Dante. We have translations of these. He didn't know about Suhrawardi at the time. His argument is that Dante Alighieri's entire Divine Comedy is influenced by the Sufism of Ibn Arabi. It may or may not be a stretch. My argument is that there was more than just Ibn Arabi making its way to Europe. While we don't have any direct textual evidence of these narratives or similar being translated into Latin or any other language, on my second reading of the Divine Comedy about 15 years ago, this is the first thing that occurred to me, is that there's more of the visionary narratives of Suhrawardi in Dante's The Divine Comedy than even Ibn Arabi. So I think your point is extremely well taken. Yeah, this is something I myself have observed. So there's another one that is not translated by text, the Risalat al-Abraj, which is the treatise that comes right after the one we just read in here, in the French translation. And this really gets fleshed out, this whole typology of going through the levels and pushing through and not stopping. This is all really extensively fleshed out by Suhrawardi in this kind of allegorical language. And the question is it possible that maybe some of these make their way to Europe? I mean, we're talking almost a 200-year period between Dante and Suhrawardi. So absolutely, there's every possibility that this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is, I mean, although, I mean, Corban, for example, didn't like this kind of argument that academic historians and philologists usually put that everybody's borrowing from everybody else, that nobody can generate a unique idea of their own. I agree with him, but there are things in Dante that one cannot overlook. Even that the Beatrice character of Dante's entire narrative is very interesting because it is that kind of Sophianic figure that at least the church usually associated with these heretical Albigensians and Cathars that it was trying to push out of Christendom. But here you have Dante Alighieri basically reviving it in the form of his human beloved, that whole unrequited love relationship that he had with Beatrice. So, and that smacks not only of Suhrawardi, but also smacks very directly of Ibn Arabi and his relationship with Nizam Ain Shams. So yeah, these things are there with Dante. If one reads Dante through this particular lens, I think a lot of things start to make a lot of sense about Dante. He's just, in some ways, it is his own story. His visionary narrative is true, but certainly, as a Florentine, he may have been influenced by a lot of things because during that time, let us not forget, when Dante was active, this is right on the cusp of the age of the Medicis and whatnot, and these people were well known to acquire all kinds of Arabic manuscripts, esoteric and occult texts. I mean, that whole explosion during the period of the Renaissance, where we have this Renaissance Neoplatonism, came about as a result of the translation commissions that they had made of a lot of Arabic philosophical and occult texts. So, in fact, the Renaissance under the Picado Mirandolas and the Medicis, etc., owes a lot to this sort of perspective. Definitely.
Yeah, that time is really fascinating. I mean,
I agree.
that's where the whole concept of the Sophia Perennis really gets
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
right?
With the Medicis themselves, yeah. And Pico.
Yeah. I was told that this will be the last thing I say, but I was told that there's a possibility that Gemistus Pletho was taught Suhrawardi by his teacher.
It wouldn't surprise. I mean, Corban was onto this because he kind of he says in a couple of places in Iranian where he says that this sort of thing that Suhrawardi is doing shows up during the Byzantine period with Gemistos Platon. So this thing that Corban first put in his second volume of Inside Iranian Islam, I think has been picked up by certain scholars, and they're probably also finding the evidence for it. Because just remember, I mean, Suhrawardi was in Anatolia. The Byzantine Empire at that point had receded to only just a very small part of what is mainland Anatolia. And back then, Muslims and especially Sufis and itinerants and all kinds of stuff were going in and out of those various areas of the Byzantines and then the Seljuks and then down south where the Ayyubids were. So it is not entirely out of the realm of possibility that before Suhrawardi's, flight to uh, Aleppo, his last place, that he was in the Byzantine-controlled areas of Rome. And if he had disciples, as Shahrazuri has his belief, then they would have certainly left some kind of impression on the locals. And if that is the case, someone like Gemislas Platon, a few decades later, it's not that long between the period of Suhrawardi's death and Platon's activity, certainly would have been influenced by Suhrawardi. No question about it.
Mhm. So, fascinating.
It is. I agree.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure thing. Anybody else?
Sidi, I would like to continue on the points of Hussein, but here I have a alternative reading about here the five elements that they are the five internal senses.
Yes.
And then it is given the typology if each of them is most close to the corresponding element.
Elements, yeah. So there's an associate. This is an association made with the fifth element being ether, right, or spirit. That these five senses implicitly, whether in Suhrawardi or some of the other authors similar to him, engaging in this sort of theurgy, they would associate and correspond to senses to these five elements.
But the interesting thing for me was that some of the internal senses are given positive role, some of them negative role, and some of them they are somewhere in between.
In between.
What I mean that قوة المفكرة, the rational faculty, and the other one which was given, and the قوة الذاكرة, which is the memory,
Yeah.
let's say the memory, intellectual memory, they were given positive roles. The two with negative roles was Wahm and Khayal, which was the imagination but separated from
Yep, and
rationality.
conjecture. Yeah.
Yes, conjecture and the imaginal memory, and one which was in between حس المشترك, that the common how would be in English the common perception,
Yeah.
that
Common
it
sense.
can appear
The common sense, not as in common sense, but the common sensual faculty. Yeah.
yes, exactly, that it can appear in angelic form if it gets revelation
Yeah.
from the divine, but it also can appear in a demonic form in the opposite case. So that was very interesting for me. As how would you comment it that
Very easy.
this kind of classification or
Sure. Yeah.
separation of the internal?
Yeah. There are two forms of the quwa mutakhayila, the the imaginating faculty. There is Corban also underscores it. There's the imaginatio vera, the true imaginal perception, and then its opposite. That so the negative imagination with the small I is tied to wah, right? And this is a faculty of imagination that has not been cultivated by dhikr. It is, irascible, so it jumps to conclusions based on just delusions, right? So it's that element of delusion. And that is the imagination that is not tempered by either ratio, right, rational, or by practice that leads to noesis. Okay, that is the negative. But in the Gnostic, right, the Gnostic who has with practicing, and exercising the tazkiyah internally, the inner self purification, which is what that second, or rather the sixth chapter, is really putting its finger on. Then that khiyal no longer functions. That imagination no longer functions on the level of wahy, because it is perceiving the suspended forms. Right? So in a sense, it has entered into the imaginal world already.
So we can say the same thing about the imaginal memory, which it was said it is unclean. My suspicion was that we can have a beautiful images.
Imagination. Yeah, just once again, remember, this is not the imaginatio vera. This is not the true imagination. So this is another way of saying delusion. Okay, but the Gnostic, is kind of above that.
So it may be somehow unclean in the beginning of the process, but in the end it is purified.
100%. I think I told this experience before. One of the first things that happened to me in the very first zikr I ever got, within like 2 or 3 days. I mean, I experienced this vast experience that was amazing. But at night, when I would walk out, especially if the moon was in any cycle, I would walk and I would see faces coming out of the ground, like literally a whole pavilion of human faces everywhere. And this kind of got unsettling. I told my sheikh this, and he said, "Don't pay any attention to that. Just acknowledge that it happened, but don't pay any don't um, project any meaning onto it. Nothing. Just look at it and pass. Okay? Don't do anything with it." It's like, okay, but what is it? He said, "Don't. I'm not going to tell you. I will tell you sometime later." He did tell me sometime later. But at that time, he said, "Don't pay any attention. Just keep doing your zikr. Keep doing it."
So, which leads me to the next question, where he is giving description of the five external senses. That I also won't agree that they are given it in completely negative sense, but I would see that instruction in the end of each section of the description of the external senses, for me at least, it sounds wise, use it wisely, very uh, only for you understand what I'm
Yes.
trying to say.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly as you were giving the example,
yeah.
just ignore anything which is irrelevant.
Mm.
Focus in your final goal. That's the way to use all of these five external senses.
Boom. That's what he's saying. So what he's not telling us is that do not destroy any of these. He's not telling them to kill any of these senses, kill them off, right? He's telling us to temper them. And just remember, once he makes it to the final pavilion, right, he is up above them looking down at them. He acknowledges their existence, which means that he has tempered them and brought them into a whole. So they no longer control him. He's above them. They're part of it, but they no longer control it. They don't distract it. Yeah.
Yes, and because in one sense, in one place he says, if they are going to trouble you, take out the sword, and the sword, it was sword of knowledge,
Yeah.
that you know how to use them wisely. Okay, and
Just
my
before you go on, safe in Tasawwuf, in Sufism, is also a symbol for dhikr.
Can you elaborate a little bit more how the dhikr, its connection with tempering the senses?
Because the zikr acts as that neutralizing faculty, the divine influx, the warid, right? That comes. It is the third thing between all of them. There's you, the zikr, and this other thing, right? And the whole point of the exercise is to allow the zikr in its invocation to then become that mirror in your consciousness to reveal its truth to you. So in a sense, it acts as a sword, or in a lot of the Persian Sufi orders, they use the battle axe. That is also a symbol for the zikr.
Okay, thank you. So the last question for now, before I give the turn to the other participants, the chapter one, the beginning, when they are given the definitions of beauty and love and sorrow, that they are the three different aspects of the first intellect, and it also somehow sounds to me similar, that idea how this three different aspects of the first intellect in the philosophical treatises of Sheikh Suhrawardi, they are cause for correspondingly creating the next intellect, the nafs of the same intellect, and the heavenly sphere. But the thing is that this separation somehow always sound me arbitrary. For example, I would agree with the first part that when the intellect look toward God, it creates beauty. That is intuitive. I completely with it. But for example, the second one, when he looked at itself, at himself, this created love. I would say, okay, but can we also say that when love is also created by just the first thing, when he looked at Creator of Allah Ta'ala,
There's
and
oh,
also with
sure,
the
sure, you could do that. This whole typology
so
reminds us
what
of
is the deep symbolic meaning
oh,
of this
there's a
tripartition?
lot of different ways. First of all, one of my interpretations of this first paragraph is as follows. We can look at this as Suhrawardi's typology of the first intellect, but we can also look at this from a vertical dimension from the bottom ground looking up. This is also about the intellectual soul of the Salik also themselves. Why? The Salik has nostalgia for a home that they don't know. We'll encounter this whole thing back again in the Tale of the Occidental Exile. Nostalgia, alienation from the world, sorrow, which is only tempered by what? By love. Now, the object here is important, right? This object is the beauty of God, the beauty of knowledge, the beauty or beauty as an archetype, right? So if you look at it from this he's also talking about the mind of the Salik itself as well. Okay. Wherein the whole point is to return to become that pearl, to become that contiguous pearl that has all these three qualities in it simultaneously united. Right. So here he is arguing from a not an a priori, the other one, a posteriori, from the effect to cause, right? Where the cause here, in a sense, is also the Salik, not just the emanation of the realms from the light of lights, but also the inner, the soul of the seeker.
I grasp that part, and I fully agree that this trio, it is just a wonderful description of reality. What I cannot fully grasp the was the source of this tree. Uh, for example, let's talk about huzn, the sorrow. But the explanation was the origin of sorrow is all thing which, when the first intellect comprehended all things which did not exist, but after that they were created. Can we say that in some sense it symbolizes that the sorrow comes from separation with the beloved, with Allah Ta'ala? Because here it we take that the creation is in some dualistic sense other than God, then comprehending creation is in some sense
Union
turning.
with God. Yeah. Yeah. Sure, we can say that. Yeah.
Okay, and then
It's sorry, Hassan loves exile from beauty.
Yeah.
excuse me, can you repeat it? I
Love's
didn't hear.
exile from beauty.
Is so gives rise to sorrow, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, sorrow is love's constant, the yearning
Yeah.
love is constant companion. And yeah, with arms around each other's shoulders, always searching for that transcendent beauty.
Yeah. Sure.
And
Searching for hosts. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what about that love is created when we look at ourselves?
Sure.
Not
Yeah, but that is the end, but this is the end result. See, um, for the Sufis, there are two different stages of love that occur. There's a valley of love that comes immediately after search, right? And this is the preliminary stage. And this love is meant to basically burn you, just burn, 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 burn. But it's not the final stage of love. The final stage of love occurs in the annihilation itself. Okay. And that annihilation is such that then all separation between you and the beloved ceases completely. So there's no longer an subject object duality, love it and lover. It just becomes love itself. Right? So implicitly, without using that Ittihadi language that we get elsewhere with the Sufis, Suhrawardi is kind of alluding to this.
okay. Okay, thank you very much, Sidi.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam.
Sidi. Yeah, so to piggyback off of what Hassan was thinking, so when I was reading it, you sort of get this idea of Adam being introduced, right? And then beauty going and like embracing Adam, right? And then after that, this sort of parallel happens where love embraces sorrow. And then while beauty and Adam are like entranced with one another, I'm sort of thinking of this as sort of like the pure experience of God as well, right? And then it seems like love is trying to reach Adam, right, along with sorrow, and then like love kind of like bonks its head against something, right? And I think the significance of this is that like it's bonking its head against something because it's still kind of like another, right?
Because it's trying to possess.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so love, this is a very subtle point that Suhrawardi is kind of pointing out to us. When love tries to possess its object, it's missing the point. It needs to be possessed by its object to the point of becoming that object. So long as it insists on its own identity as love, then it has failed to understand what's going on. And that is why its separation occurs from beauty.
Right. There's almost, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess because there's almost that like sense of like entitlement within the loved.
Yeah, yeah, but that's one
Yeah.
way to phrase it. Yeah, a sense of entitlement. Um, Hafez has a ghazal, very famous one. I've used it in several places and translated in several different ways. He says, در ازل پرتو حسنت ز تجلی دم زد عشق پیدا شد و آتش به عالم زد. In pre-eternity, the beauty of your love consented to self-disclosed. Love appeared, and its fires burnt through the worlds. That's a very, very famous ghazal of Hafiz, which is basically in 2 verses saying exactly what Suhrawardi is trying to tell us.
This is
Right.
Mary.
Can anyone hear me? Hi.
Hey,
This
hi.
is to me probably the most important aspect of this treatise because it's the inciting event.
Yes.
Without this stupefaction and separation that occurs, the journey through the microcosm, the city of the soul, wouldn't even happen. It wouldn't be possible. And a Gnostic text called the Paraphrase of Shem references this force as the shock of astonishment that separates astonishment from the active intellectual spirit. And it arises from forgetfulness. Yet also this amazement is what frees us from its bonds. You know, without forgetfulness, it wouldn't be possible. It's this sort of other Gnostic concept, like that fullness exists for the deficiency of grace. You know, healing exists for the sick. We wouldn't really know healing without the sick. There is a sort of Akbarian dualism in it. Yeah. Where this astonishment, this witnessing of beauty is the goal of the path, but it's also a pitfall similar to infatuation or stupefaction.
Yeah, definitely. And the stupefaction and obsession is actually not ultimately even about the object, it's about the subject themselves. And that is
right.
That's what they need to get over in order to actually attain the very union that they seek. And as long as they don't get it, they're separated.
Yeah, it's kind of the start and the end of the quest. Without it, there would be no journey. There would be no even distinction between microcosm and macrocosm, no soul, no pearl. This entire text, it reminded me quite a lot of the Song of the Pearl, which is a supplement to the Acts of Thomas. And Suhrawardi must have had knowledge of it, if not just been directly riffing off of it. Presumably it might have been composed in Persia.
There are Aramaic versions of the Hymn of the Pearl and Acts of Thomas. Corban has a lot to say about this. In fact, about a third of the second volume of On Islam Iranian Inside Iranian Islam, he just talks endlessly about this, as well as the original Iranian Grail legends, which he believes all originate in Iran itself.
The search for the pearl and the search for the grail are totally analogous to one another. But the parallels are just completely overflowing. I mean, the Song of the Pearl begins with a descent into Egypt from heaven, which is love, separation from beauty, but love even journeys into Egypt in this story. And when the pearl is found, the seeker is revested with the robe of glory, you know, Joseph's coat of many colors. Joseph, who also shows up in the story as maybe a beatific angelophany of some sort.
This is very much Suhrawardian, and this is one of the reasons why Corban believed very strongly of some kind of Arabic or even Persian translations of this, and if it was accessible to Suhrawardi, it obviously influenced it, along with all these other things that influenced it.
There were Syriac versions of the Song of the Pearl.
Syriac, and if they were Syriac, then translating into Arabic would have been just next step, which is very easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I actually reread the Song of the Pearl when after reading this, and I noticed that there are some side characters that are mentioned just in passing I never paid attention to before. That says in the song that once the robe of glory is restored to the seeker's brother, the next in rank with him, will be heir to the kingdom. That could be love and sorrow, who are depicted as brothers in this story. And the seeker who travels down to Egypt, it mentions only in one line that he has two royal guides, which could also be, beauty and sorrow traveling psychically with him.
You should write a commentary on this, Mary. Juxtapose to him in the
yeah, it's just the parallels are totally leaping out at me.
Yeah, it is.
It's very exciting to me.
And Corban thinks
I had one note.
Go for it.
On what Corban was talking about in the fifth portico with distinguishment, and I found your translation very useful because it mentions the 8 powers: hot and cold, moist and dry, light and heavy, smooth and rough, that are tactile. But Corban says that the rolling up of the carpet designates the case in which the tactile faculty has not been used. Is that a negative judgment or a positive one? I'm a little confused.
From Corban's point of view, it seems to be a positive one, in that when the rolling up happens, you're basically now free of it. But that's where he's getting that, is from this commentary on this very text that he then criticizes for missing.
Right. It seems like he the rolling up of the carpet is maybe not a lost opportunity, but an intentional denial of like the archontic enslavement of touch and whatnot. Material, you can touch it; spiritual, you can't. There's a sort of, you gotta attest to these intangibles. He actually mentions that earlier in another treatise. I think these intangibles are very important to the matter at hand, and to deny them exclusively for tangibility would be limiting. It would be delimiting.
You wouldn't progress at all. If that would be the trap.
Right. But it's also so Gnostic because it's like denying an entire sense in a way.
Yeah. You don't get that. I mean, you get some of that sometimes in Suhrawardi and also in Corban, but he kind of stops short of total denial, which is something I like about Suhrawardi. But he is, just don't forget.
It's interesting because the tempering of the senses and the sharpening of the intellect happen in direct tandem with one another. It's not just that you sharpen the intellect by tempering the senses, or that you temper the senses by sharpening the intellect. There's a really complex interplay here, I feel like.
Yeah, there is.
It reminds me of the purgatives from the last few chapters, where he's saying you need to create an emetic or a purgative from the things you love, almost seemingly by partaking in them. It's a sort of fast of partaking in the world. You create a purgative out of the world itself. This reminds me of this method of sharpening the intellect. Reminded me of the saga of Dietrich of Bern, which is a Norse saga in which a smith, Wayland, seeks out to forge a sword, the sharpest sword in the world, called Miming. And what he does is he grinds up steel pellets or iron pellets and mixes them with cornmeal and feeds them to geese, and then they excrete it out, and he sifts out the iron filings from the excrement, and he feeds them to geese 3 times to get them as fine as possible before forging the sword, which it's very alchemical. And this method of forging Miming, the sharpest sword, I think I looked up the etymology on Miming at one point, and it's related to being viciously sharp, or maybe even to the constellation Scorpio. But it culminates with the sword cutting a guy in half who brags that he has the world's hardest helmet. So just goes to show, if you put your mind to it, I guess.
Yeah. Great. You should. I want to see a write-up by you on this.
I'd like to write on it, but I feel like I have so many other things.
Okay.
We'll see.
We'll see. Riaz, Jeff.
I was wondering if the introduction of other characters after Adam, like Jacob and then Joseph and then what's her name? I'm not sure how.
Zulaikha,
Okay.
Potiphar's wife in the Islamic universe. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is this following a similar trajectory as of like an Ibn Arabi type situation
Sort of.
going
Yeah.
down?
Yeah, sort of. It is.
Because I'm wondering, I have to admit, those names tripped me up, and I'm still not sure exactly what to make of them, being illiterate in terms of Persian iconography.
You obviously know the story of Joseph, Potiphar, and his wife in the Bible, right?
Well, not particularly. I'm not as well read as you might presume. No, I mean, even with the Quran, I mean, I've read the Quran, but it's not like I have it memorized and, have all the relationships and all of the figures historically like sorted out in my mind. So when it comes to names, they always give me a hard time because they're not as abstract as my mind is used to
Well,
thinking.
the story, both in the Bible and the Quran, just the names and some details are changed. Joseph enters the land of Egypt. He gets quickly elevated through the household of Potiphar, according to the biblical narrative, Aziz, according to the Quran. During this process, the wife of Potiphar, a very sultry, beautiful Egyptian woman, falls in love with Joseph. He's a very handsome, beautiful young man and tries to seduce him. And in the Quranic narrative, she comes very close to accomplishing the seduction, and Joseph pulls back. Potiphar finds out and is pissed off, and Joseph is thrown out of his household and then briefly again imprisoned, but he makes it out, and next time he becomes even more elevated than the position he had in Potiphar's household. But there are several scenes in the Quranic stories where the other women in the household of Potiphar also see Joseph as a result of Zoleikha, the wife of Potiphar, telling him, and they are so enraptured by Joseph that they cut their fingers off. Okay.
Okay.
So that you get not that exact narrative in the Bible, but there is an attempted seduction that kind of fails. I've taken this whole story in the Effulgences of Wisdom and basically reread it altogether, making the failure in the seduction of Joseph become a tantric initiation rite gone bad on the part of Joseph.
Okay.
But what is important here is that these tropes, these archetypes, are very similar between the Quran and the Bible, and they're communicating various things. In both the Bible and the Quran, you can look at Potiphar's wife, who is named Zuleikha in the Islamic tradition, as representing love itself. And Joseph is husn, is the beauty.
Okay.
Could the imprisonment that resulted from Joseph's denial of Zuleikar be like he's cast into the dungeons, into the depths of the palace? Could that be also analogous to the journey into through these different levels of the divans and the
Yes.
beings residing over them? So he's cast into this sort of dungeon or labyrinth that now he has to work his way through, and it's both the city of the soul and the material body.
Whereas what I tried to do in the Effulgence of Wisdom basically says that when God decides to appear, if you don't realize the manifestation of God in that form of the woman, then you fall into the prison. But if you realize that this entire process is short-circuited through that initiation, that was the point I was trying to make in that chapter of Zuleikha.
Kind of like how the Quran says people will go through the stages, but for people who know, you don't necessarily have to. You can skip a ton of them.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't say that like that.
But it is true. I mean, with Suhrawardi, we don't get that. But with some of the more Qalandari Sufis, and sometimes with Ibn Arabi, not all the time, we get this, that all of these processes, there's nothing set in stone. There's no manual here that you have to go through step 1, 2, 3. It all depends on your own elevation. If you get it, you get it. You go through all 5 pavilions in one step. If you don't get it, then you're kind of forced by your own,
This almost seems to imply that this almost seems to imply that the intuitive sense of grasping, things intuitively is superior to the other senses.
Yes. This is where we end up with all of these guys. Yeah. And that is why the distinction between the inverted imagination versus the true imagination becomes such an important distinction, and how to get there.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, very much.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Yes, and thank you.
Sure thing. Okay. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have another look at it, and after listening to the replay, listening to this again later, and it will all fall into place. But
Or
yeah,
just
when it comes to
go to the Old Testament, read. It's a very short part. Book of Exodus.
you know what? I have never read the Bible. I've
Really?
read bits and pieces here and there, but
Read it online.
It's a big book, and every time I've tried, I'm like, I just get bored of it. I'm like, this isn't for me, and I put it away and I read something else. So no, when it comes to biblical references and basically myths of yore, I'm very quite illiterate, and so I'm kind of relying on more abstract ways of describing things. I mean, if that makes any sense. So sorry to interrupt you there, but no, yeah, the Bible and me didn't. We've never mixed.
It's
I had a better time with the Quran, believe it or not.
Interesting. Well, for comparative literary purposes, you should look at both narratives: the story of Potiphar, Joseph and Potiphar's wife, and then look at the analogous story in the Quran as well. Because there's a lot of interesting stuff to mull over.
Okay. I'll try to do that. Thank you.
No worries.
Sidi, I would like to add a couple of questions. Here at page 60, somewhere in the middle, as they approach, Love, the commander-in-chief, handed over the deputyship to Sorrow and commanded everyone to kiss the ground from afar, because they would not have been able to endure close proximity to him. About the meaning of this passage. Here, proximity to who? First question. And second question, why they would
Proximity
not be
to
able.
beauty, obviously, when that elevation happens. Yeah.
Okay. The next one, why I have some intuitive grasping, but nevertheless, what they would not endure a close proximity to it.
Well, if
just to say what it's similar, what it sounds similar to me, but the Almighty Allah God have 70,000 of veils.
Veils.
If they are removed, everything to which his sight reaches will be
disappear,
completely burned.
obliterated. Yeah. An image that actually shows up in one of these prayers to the planets by Suhrawardi, by the way. What he's saying here is a kind of complicated way of saying. It's a complicated way of saying that if you don't understand the value of these two, primarily love and sorrow, and sorrow here is not just sorrow, he uses the word hozn, which also has the denotation of nostalgia. Okay, and that is such an important element in entire metaphysics, visionary metaphysics of Suhrawardi, nostalgia. Nostalgia for what? Obviously for the Mashriq, for the Orient of Light, Mashriq al-Nur. This is what he's trying to communicate. Once that refinement of these archetypal persons is realized, once you realize what their real purpose is, sorrow, love, and then beyond that to beauty, then you have a better way of grasping the whole passage, the whole journey itself, right? Human beings in the world, in material world, are searching after these things all the time. An object to love. Then they lose it, sorrow becomes their companion. Beauty has departed them, right? So they're still seeking, but once this elevation of the senses and understanding, when you've entered into the microcosm of your own being, then you're on a different level. And so, sorrow becomes the deputy, love becomes the prince or the king, and Host as beauty occupies its proper place. Now, just get this: Host and Jamal are synonyms, except when we use the word Jamal, it is always very explicitly divine. When we say beauty, when we use the word Jamal, and Jamal is usually it's taken as both a name and an attribute, whereas the name analogous to Host is Mohsen, that we have as one of the names of God. When we use Host by itself, we may or may not be denoting a divine reality. Okay? So this is something that you need to keep in mind, that once this elevation happens, the Host that we're talking about now is Jamal itself. It's no longer just Host, beauty, small b, you see something and you feel, you get infatuated with it, be a person or an object or whatever, right? Once that refinement comes, then the divine purpose of the Jamal itself becomes obvious. Now, this is where I find it especially interesting. Jamal, in all of the treatises of Tasawwuf, Jamal represents, divine beauty represents the immanence of God, the tashbih. It is the Jalal where we're talking about the Tanzi, the transcendence, right? And then so all the attributes that fall under the Jalali, rubric are the wrathful and the powerful and all the very manly and masculine kind of attributes of God. Whereas the feminine, the soft, the latif, the subtle or magnanimous, etc. All of the Ar-Rahman, the compassionate, Rahim, etc. All these very soft and, those are the feminine. And the way I have read this, and this is Corban starts to kind of tickle this out in that commentary of his, this is where in that elevation, Suhrawardi is now talking about the Sophia, the divine feminine itself, in a very elusive kind of way. But nevertheless, that is what he's put his finger on. Because just remember, this is one of the only visionary treatises, unlike the last couple that we've read, where, the whole point of the exercise is not really, it's not this dialogue between the active intellect in the forms that it appears to the novice. This is about something else. It's more complicated. You kind of have to search to see who is where, what character represents what, etc. Right? And this is very deliberate because it is an initiatic tale. So he's making you work for your understanding of these things.
Just to add to what you attribute of Jamal and Jalal, that beauty, which usually is of the attributes of Jamal, of the feminine part, I would say here in the treatise and also as experience, it is completely the opposite, which demonstrates how beauty with the names of Jabbar, Kahar, Mutakabbir, and so on. But it is the one who rules, the one who doesn't care about anything else, the one who is the highest, and so on.
This is what I find interesting, because the Host, the beauty that departs love and sorrow, is acting in a very Jalali mode. It is not the Jamal, because the Jamal is constantly giving and close and tender, and it doesn't walk away in a huff. It's Jalal that does that, right? And this is important in one sense because it's sort of indicating that, when the divine transcendence departs, right? Rather than the soul like giving up the quest, because this is what usually happens. God is so transcendent, accessible, I cannot reach it. Why even try? I'm just going to stand still where I am and not finish the journey. Whereas as you progress, that transcendence itself becomes more and more imminent. And this is what he's trying to push us, kind of subtly getting us trying to see. And the various, rather than persons, but rather the archetypes or the images that these are kind of conveying in this story, the narrative of the story.
And the last question, the places of manifestations, where these archetypes choose to descend. Beauty with Joseph, love with Zuleika, sorrow with Yaqub alayhi salam. But this is the second time which happens. The first time with Adam, where the beauty descends onto Adam. And then after a while, it goes home, and the second time it descends to Joseph, which creates, at least when I read it, I understand that there is some gap between Adam and Joseph.
There's not only
And
we don't only have a chronological gap between Adam and Joseph. We also have a very conspicuous narratival gap in the story between Adam and Joseph. The question that is only very elusively even addressed: why would beauty host and depart Adam?
Exactly. Isn't beauty always present and manifest in everything? That was the question which came to my mind. What it comes back home, and then the second time descends with Yusuf. What is this? Its
Well,
meaning?
first of all, on the very outer layer, obviously the story of the garden and the fall, right? Which in the Quran is not quite articulated in the same way that the Bible does. It sort of is, but it also isn't. Who is the actual villain? And all of this stuff is a little bit vaguer in the Quran than it is in the Bible. But isn't it strange that with the mention of Adam in this story, there's a very conspicuous silence about Eve? Where is she?
Yes, exactly.
There's your answer. The absence of mention is the indication of what has left. Right? And so then you have to enter the Gnostic and more esoteric and mystical interpretations of Eve and Adam and their story and what that all means. Because Host, even in Suhrawardi, has a very feminine dimension, although here Faxon is kind of using the masculine pronouns. This is Persian. There is no masculine pronoun in Persian. So it's not exactly clear whether any of these characters are even males or females, although they call themselves at one point brothers. But the pronouns are there's no he or she in Persian. So, but in this chapter 2, where is Eve? Why is she not?
In a lot of Gnostic texts, like on the origin of the world, and I think the Gospel of Truth, the celestial Eve is the one who breathes the spirit of life into the terrestrial Adam.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that transposition of roles, whereas the spirit is often cast as masculine, as fertile and generative, for that reason, in Gnostic retellings, that is transposed. I thought that was maybe related to the way that beauty is acting in a very sort of like majestic, wrathful mode here.
Yeah.
The same interplay and like transposition of modalities is occurring.
Yes. But without mentioning it. This is what I find very ingenious on the part of Suhrawardi. He's not
It's really
That's
interesting.
really-
It's really subtle.
Yeah.
But I thought that what you said about beauty acting in a majestic mode was really key to understanding some of what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. So keep that in mind, as that, you know, the absence of Eve is actually her presence, or rather, the absence of Sophia is the presence of Sophia, where Adam is concerned in this particular part of this visionary narrative. Presence by absence. Quite ingenious little literary ploy here.
It's kind of gestalt, the way that the negative space implies a fuller picture.
Yes.
You know, like like almost like a blast shadow, you know, like you see shadows on a wall after someone's been annihilated by a great force. Something was here. You can get a shape, an idea of it by inference.
Yes. And this is one of the reasons why these sorts of visionary narratives are initiatic. They're not going to give you all information. You have to work it out, even in the spaces of the absence, about what is what. Anybody else? All right. Oh, we had a good 1 hour 37 minutes today. Obviously, next week we're going to finish this visionary narrative. I would really advise you to look at that translation of Corban. Corban, you know, for those who haven't read him, has a very elliptical style of writing, but he himself is a deep esotericist and Gnostic, and if you're patient with him, he's a gift that keeps on giving, especially around Suhrawardi. So, and tomorrow, obviously, we'll come back for maybe an Arabic class and look more at base study on substance and accident. So until tomorrow, for those of you who are coming tomorrow at the same time, I'll see you then. For those who are not coming tomorrow, we'll get back together next week, obviously, and finish the story. Everybody be well. We'll leave it here for today. Yahak.